So this is our weekly roundup. I've got my notes. So longer video to just round up what we've talked about this week in the 7 shorter videos that I've shared on TikTok and Instagram. So we will start with we started off with a few general goals or tips to start with, and then we moved on to focusing on selling and around a pitch or a booth. So your space, but also you can use these or a lot of the tips in if you're online as well. So there's a little bit for everybody, I think. So first up, we were talking from day or episode 8 now. So the first one was to set some goals. So it's really important when you are starting or running any business that you know where you're heading. So making sure you've got some goals written down. So we talked about having one shorter this time next month, and then a longer one this time next year. So what are your goals for that? Now, it might be monetary goals, it might be lifestyle goals, or it might be business goals, as in you want to, by this time next year or next month, have your own website, be on another platform, have your own shop, be in a second antique centre, so whatever that is. So it was setting 2 goals, a shorter and a longer one. So that was episode 8. And then making sure everything you do from now on takes you a step closer to those goals. So if it doesn't, don't do it, was really the thoughts on that one. So there are some things that you will do, even if it doesn't step you forward. But we're talking about generally, when you're doing anything in your business, think about your goals. So write them down in your diary that we created in the first week, and use those goals and keep reminding yourself. So it might be that you have a weekly refresh of your goals. You might have them up on your wall as well as in your diary. So always keep referring back to them when you are going to make any decisions. And then episode 9 was a good one, which is learning to say no. So this is one that lots of people struggle with, but it was moving on from the setting the goals. So if you might be offered, and this happens all the time, especially when you're brand new, you might be offered lots of stock that seems really cheap, too cheap to refuse. It might be an opportunity to go into a centre or a new fair that's starting, maybe particularly if it's a fair that is brand new itself and it's not being tested yet. So think about whether it's the right time for you to do it, and whether it takes you one step forward to those goals that you wrote down in episode 8. And if it doesn't, then it's okay to say no to whatever the opportunity is. Particularly happens with stock. When you're offered stock, it seems really cheap. It's a bit of a pain to go and fetch it, maybe. It's a bit of a pain to store it. And you end up with it, and you end up having to just try and get rid of it. It becomes your problem. So if you're unsure, then say no to those things. And I know it's scary sometimes to say no, but once you do it a few times, it's okay. Then episode 10, we moved on to setting up your space. So it was setting up the backdrops of your pitch or your booth, whichever you call it. When you get or go into a new shop or a flea market stall, but if we talk about a shop to a space in a pitch or your booth to start with, when you get the space given to you, the temptation is to just go as fast as you can to get your stuff in so you can start trading. But really think about plan how you're going to use the space, how customers will view it and use it as well. How will you stock your space? What kinds of bits of furniture do you need, maybe, or smalls? So I went into a new pitch this week, which I have been recording to share with you as well. So it was I wasn't allowed, or you don't do anything to the, not that wasn't allowed, but you don't do anything to the area. The area is what you get. So you sort of have to make the most of it. Some spaces are totally redecorated when you go in. Others you're allowed to paint. So just find out what the actual rules are for the space that you're taking over. Because there's no point having these big ideas of you wanted to paint it a certain colour or do something if that's not something that they allow. Lots of it is maybe to do with listed buildings and stuff like that. So I was able to put stuff against the wall, but not change the wall in any way, colour, etc. So I went with the Hessian, which is just the most simple and the cheapest way to do it, and then you can put stuff on top of it. So I Hessianed basically the outer perimeter of my space and stapled it onto the wall, so you got a nice clean background, and then adding stuff on top. So do you want sort of a cladded wall effect on a certain section or all of it, depending on the size of your space? If it's a bigger space, what's the best way to design it if it's a smaller space, so that you can get as much stock on as possible? So have a think about that when you have got the space. How will you design it? So when you go maybe to look at the space to take it on, take some photos so that you can refer back to it when you're not there and in your mind, or you might do some notes of how you want to set it out and getting your backdrops in, basically. So getting all the bones of your space in as your first job before you start to put stock in and other things. So that was episode 10. Then episode 11 was building on that, then is telling the story or telling your story in your space there. So making it personal to you, making it so when people look at, maybe it's in an antique centre and they're looking around the antique centre, they see you and your sort of style is the same as the style you have online, and they can tell sort of who you are, what kinds of things you love and what you sell, so they get that straight away when they see your space. You're going to have your name up if you can have that up there. You might have some little story cards around. So we talked about if you are a maker of things, you might have little story cards of what inspires you. So if you make wooden items or candles or whatever it might be, you might be inspired by certain seasons or colours or textures, so you might have little story cards of that. So that was episode 11. So it was telling your story so that when people come onto your space, they can tell the kind of person you are, what interests you, the backstory of your business as well. So you might tell that through the items that you have there, or you might physically have a written thing of why you started or whatever it might be for you. So episode 12 was showing the potential of an item. So that was if you have items that maybe the original use you would not use that for now. I think the example I gave was this riddle here, although you can still use a riddle in the garden. It might be an old mangle, it might be just something else that you wouldn't use now as its original purpose. Reimagining that item and telling people what they could use it for now. So you could style it up in a certain way to show them, or you could write on your label. So you would maybe write on your label what it is and maybe its original use, and then some ideas of how you would use it now. So in the kitchen, great for storage or whatever. And also that works exactly the same online, so writing something in the description of how they would use it now. So showing the potential of items so that some people, when they come into your space, they can see something and they'll know exactly how to use it in their own home. Some other people need a little bit more inspiration. So that was episode 12. And episode 13 was to think like a customer. So that was when you are looking at your space, think about not only as a shopper, when you go shopping, how you move around the space and what would attract you on your area there. So your shoppers, what might attract them. So we're also, in a bit, we talk about knowing who your customers are, so what kinds of people they are. But when you are viewing it as a customer and you walk around into the area, or if you're at a flea market and you've got your stall there, what catches your eye first? What side of the space catches your eye? So you might want some of your nicer items there to stop people in their tracks, kind of thing. Is there anything that as a customer they would want to look at, stop, move to the side, making sure everything isn't on one level? So you've got lots of different heights, and we talked about, and I think that was in a later one, different bits of storage that you can use around the shop. So that was thinking like your customer, making sure you have them in mind. And yes, I think that was what we did with that. I've got used baskets filled with fabrics who enjoy rummaging. Yeah, we did that on that episode. So when you go shopping, and this is what I talked about, when you go shopping, what sorts of things do you like? So lots of customers like to see everything set out, and lots of customers like to rummage. So in that one we talked about having baskets maybe with fabrics in, having things that were piled up with little bits and bobs in, having stuff up on the wall, maybe showing them alternative uses like we talked about in the reimagining thing. So all of the time thinking about what your different customers like to do and how they like to shop. So that was that one. And then 15 was not to put all your best stock out in one go. So it's really tempting when you take on your new space, shop or whatever it might be, to put all of your very best stock out. So you'll save it for sort of weeks and months before. Maybe you'll be saving up loads of lovely stock, and then if you put it all out in one go and all of those items sell, which we hope they do, is the stock that you've got to go into it next time you visit as good a quality as the stock that's just sold? So if you keep a few nice pieces back, you've always got those to feed into over the next week or 2 weeks. So it was not putting everything out. When you first go into your space, everything will look fantastic. And what we want is for that to continue. So we just don't want the first week of opening or the first day everything to look fantastic and really top quality stuff, and then the second week and the third week the quality starts to drop off. So if you keep a little bit back, you've always got those to feed in. So that was episode 15. And I think just on episode 14 as well, we on the thinking of your customer, we talked about people that like to search and discover items. So maybe they're tucked away a little bit in boxes on the floor, things up high, so different heights, different textures, and how customers move around the space. So that was that one. And then 16, which was maintaining your space. So you've got it all perfect, and now you're running it as well. And it was just to keep maintaining it. So one of the questions is, how often should you go to your space? So the answer to that is how often can you get down to your space? So if you can get down once a week, that's great. If you can get down more than once a week, that's even better. Don't worry if you've got nothing new to put into the space. It's always worth going and rejiggling stuff around and maintaining it. So having a clean and a tidy round, having a brush or a hoover around it, moving stuff maybe that hasn't sold and you might want to edit the price on those and write a new ticket on them. Make sure all the items are still got their tickets attached and they still look neat. You might want to redo tickets. And what else were we thinking on those? Take stuff out that maybe you've had for a little bit longer and move it to another space or another pitch. Maybe think about doing a flea market a couple of times a year to clear out some stock that you've had throughout the or stock that hasn't sold throughout the year. And maybe I usually do one in the spring to sort of clear out my winter stock, and then again in the autumn to clear out anything left over summer, and then buy fresh stuff in. So that's sort of what I do. But you can always put stuff back in if you take it away for a couple of weeks and then add it back in. Maybe when you add it back in, you edit the price slightly, put it in a different position so it looks new. So if you've not got any new stock at all, go down, reset your pitch. So move stuff around, restyle it in a slightly different way. If you've got a centerpiece or nice big item, you might move that away and put something else there that you want to try and show off before moving it back. So what we're avoiding is if you have sold an item off a sideboard, so that item is on the sideboard and you've sold that you're not just putting something else similar or another thing in its place. So maybe move the sideboard to the other side of your space if you can, if that's possible, if you've got the space there, and put something else there. So really move stuff around. And you'll always find that people, when you've moved stuff, you might have had it there for ages and ages, and as soon as you move it, put it in a different place, show it off in a different way, people will buy it. So that is the roundup for this week, the tips, and hopefully that has helped. And I'll see you next week for the roundup of the next week one, which we'll move on because we covered a little bit of your sort of spacing, pitches and booths. So I've had some questions. I've also been answering the questions in shorts on YouTube as well. And let's see what we go on to next, sort of more general advice possibly next week, but we will see how it goes. So take care. I'll see you later. Bye.